I have transmigrated into the daughter of a merchant who has nothing but money. I have neither the script of a beloved character nor a system to protect me. But what does that matter? Even without the halo of a protagonist, I can still dazzle everyone. When my mother-in-law and husband publicly accused me of failing to produce an heir in 3 years, intending to divorce me and seize my dowry, I knelt down and tearfully cried out, "My husband, he, has been impotent for years, with no cure in sight." To this day, I remain untouched. How could I possibly be with child? Come on, let's hurt each other. Now it's my dear husband's turn to prove himself. After these words were spoken with perfect enunciation, the Erhu background music at the Marquis's birthday banquet came to a halt. Fearing that everyone might not have heard clearly just now, I pitifully and delicately, like a willow swaying in the wind, knelt with a thud before the crowd. Half covering my face and tilting my head slightly as if struggling to speak, I opened and closed my lips, enunciating each word clearly. Mother-in-law, my husband, he is truly incapable in the bedchamber. In a man's world, there is no such thing as easy. It all falls on me, his wife. To carry the burden alone. The lively birthday banquet fell silent at my shocking revelation. Even the servant playing the Erhu accompaniment was so stunned that he stopped his performance, his mouth agape. Ready to savor the gossip, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Shui Wei's face, which had turned ashen to the extreme, and his expression, which had yet to register what had happened. A faint smile escaped from the corner of my lips, hidden by the sleeve of my robe. Perhaps it was only now that Shui Wei realized I was different from the noble ladies of prominent families. I was more shameless than them. A gentle breeze brushed lightly against everyone's cheeks. Seated in the main position, my mother-in-law was the first to react. She slammed her hand heavily on the rosewood table in front of her, causing the wine to spill. "You, what nonsense are you talking? My son is a handsome and talented man. How could he possibly, he stammered for a long time, but still couldn't bring himself to utter the words impotent. I cried so hard I nearly fainted, tears welling up in my eyes. First, I discreetly glanced at the servant playing the Erhu. Upon catching my look, he quickly understood, gave a subtle squeeze to the 2 tails of silver hidden in his sleeve, and promptly continued playing the strings. In an instant, I entered Oscar-worthy acting mode, delivering a tearful accusation as the background music, Erquan Yingyu, the moon reflected in the second spring, began to play simultaneously. Although my husband is tall and imposing, yet, over these 3 years, we have privately consulted countless physicians. But none could prescribe a single effective remedy. I have longed to bring forth heirs for the Marquis's household, but alas, I am powerless. Her gentle words, carried by the breeze and accompanied by the mournful strains of the Erhu, drifted into everyone's ears, conjuring up countless scenes of sweaty exertion ending in disappointment. Beside them, the wife of the censor, who had long been at odds with her mother-in-law, hid a mocking smile behind her fan and eagerly chimed in with the gossip. "Is it true that on the morning after the wedding, I heard the young Marquis returned home from outside? Could it be that he was unable to fulfill his duties in the bridal chamber and stormed out in frustration?" A clamor of voices erupted all around. 3 years ago, the moment I transmigrated was not ideal. The moment I opened my eyes, I had already completed the wedding ceremony with Shui Wei. The ideal of a harmonious and respectful marriage was nowhere to be found. My husband schemed day after day to divorce me on the grounds of my inability to bear children, so he could rightfully seize my dowry and then bring his cherished mistress into the mansion with a grand wedding procession. So much silver, and I, this corporate drone, haven't even had my fill of it yet. How dare he think he can get his hands on it? On the wedding night, Shui Wei, with a cold expression, didn't bother to spare me any face. Before we could even drink the nuptial wine, he humiliated me right in front of the matchmaker. then quietly left the Shui residence that very night to go to the private residence of his mistress, a night of bravery, fully displaying his masculine prowess. But now, with no cameras or recorders, who can prove what he did on that wedding night, I snapped back to reality, turning my three-quarter profile slightly toward the most gossipy imperial censor's wife. I put on an expression of extreme vulnerability, as if struggling to speak, and quietly shed tears as I lamented, the wedding night should be one of life's greatest joys, but my husband tried for half the night and still, the highest art of modern gossip taught me, there was no need to say more. The unspoken words left endless room for imagination. The imperial censor's wife gasped in shock, her mouth agape, while everyone else turned their scrutinizing and disdainful gazes toward Shui Wei, whose face had already turned ashen. Only then did Shui Wei barely react. The gazes darting around like sharp arrows seemed to strip one bare, placing them before everyone for careful scrutiny and judgment. Shui Wei's face instantly turned ashen with rage. He slammed the table hard, stood up, and pointed at me, kneeling before the crowd, cursing loudly. Yi Ji, what nonsense are you spouting? It's clearly you who, holding the title of the young mistress of the Shui family, cannot bear children. How dare you shamelessly shift the blame onto me, the Marquis? My heart is filled with utter disappointment. Before coming here, I imagined that family conflicts would involve poisoning, sowing discord, and a constant rotation of overt and covert schemes. After arriving, I realized that watching empresses in the palace over a dozen times was all in vain. Such high-level palace intrigue is completely unnecessary here. In fact, if Shui Wei were thrown into the office of my penny-pinching boss, he would most likely only survive in the memories of his colleagues, becoming the cannon fodder who exited early in everyone's minds, a cautionary tale that people would relish discussing. I cried even more pitifully, and without thinking, I tugged at my sleeve, revealing the bright red cinnabar on my left wrist. It was freshly applied this morning, still warm and vivid. My husband's reprimand is justified. It is my fault for not being able to conceive from afar. I will reflect deeply on myself and strive to do my best to expand the family line for the Marquis's household. The Erhu-playing servant, with keen perception, paused the background music and continued to gleefully pinch the 2 taels of reward silver hidden in his sleeve, and I, who was too weak to take care of myself, fainted from grief amid the exclamations of the crowd. I was just pretending. After the lively guests, who had watched the spectacle to their heart's content, had left, the maid Chun Dao leaned close to my ear and whispered with a spirited tone, "Miss, wake up, everyone is gone." I opened my eyes, full of life, and what greeted me was the priceless Suzhou-embroidered silk curtain of Wanshou Pavilion. By the time it reached the generation of Shui Wei, the Marquis's household had long been unable to make ends meet for many years. The estate was riddled with unfillable holes and external debts, and even the pampered mother-in-law had not had new clothes tailored for over a year. In the dilapidated estate, only the Wanshou Pavilion where I resided was luxurious and noble, standing out starkly against the surrounding desolate and decaying mansion. Chun Dao could no longer contain her excitement, her face glowing with enthusiasm as she recounted what had happened after I fainted. "Miss, you have no idea." The young Marquis's face turned as green as the Persian green chrysanthemums in our backyard. The old madam's birthday banquet didn't continue either, and all the guests who came slipped away hurriedly. The young Marquis couldn't bear the anger, came to our courtyard to make a fuss, and then left the estate with his servants. No one knows where he went. I spoke with a leisurely air. Where else could I go? Naturally, to a place where I can prove my prowess. Chun Dao asked in confusion. Did you go to the medical clinic? Ha, I scoffed, tapping Chun Dao's puzzled head. What could a medical clinic possibly reveal? It's quite possible that the rumors outside are saying those old fellows have been bribed by the Marquis's household To prove myself, I naturally had to go to a place with plenty of beauties. Chundao didn't react for a moment. Her delicate brows tightly furrowed. Where is that? Guess. Where in the capital city are there the most girls? When I barged into Yufeng Tower with a group of maids and servants, covered in dust and exhaustion, I could hear the sounds of smashing and angry shouting from far away. You've come at just the right time. I carefully touched the makeup on my face. It was waterproof and smudge-proof, so even if I cried hard, it wouldn't wash away the pallor, leaving visible tear streaks. Nor would it smudge the touch of rouge at the corner of my eye. In everyone's eyes, I'm just a pitiful woman who has been badly mistreated by her husband's family. Chundao whispered very seriously in my ear. Miss, everything is ready. The onlookers will be here soon. I gave a slight nod, took a deep breath, and stood outside Yufeng Pavilion, gathering my emotions. Then, I allowed Chundao to support my frail self into this den of iniquity that I would normally avoid at all costs. I raised my voice in a sorrowful cry. Husband, anger harms the body, and it only makes you more impotent. Inside Yufeng Pavilion, Shui Wei's face turned ashen and livid. His once handsome features were now overshadowed by a sinister and menacing expression, making him appear somewhat terrifying. During the day, Yufeng Tower had few customers. In the empty first-floor hall, the madam watched the young marquis's rage with a worried expression, not daring to step forward to say anything. She could only force a smile, her plump cheeks trembling as she tried to console him from the side. Young Master Shui, if there's anything the girls have done to displease you, please calm your anger and be more forgiving. How could Shui Wei swallow this insult? He angrily smashed the crystal cup in his hand to the ground once more. Amid the scattered shards, he roared at the group of pale-faced, frightened girls. A bunch of common, vulgar women. Just one look at you makes me lose my appetite. The madam sighed with a furrowed brow and a sorrowful expression. Our peony from Yufeng Tower is a stunning beauty. How could she possibly be some common, cheap powder? You've injured your own body and can't. How can you take out your frustrations on the girls like this? I raised an eyebrow, suppressing a cold laugh in my heart. While Shui Wei was secretly keeping a mistress and plotting to take my money, I had long since sought out a potent medicine. Taking advantage of the banquet preparations for the wine, I coaxed Shui Wei into drinking it all. Once such a fierce and potent medicine enters the stomach, even if Shui Wei were to devour 1,000-year-old ginseng root today and then gulp down 2 pounds of snow lotus soup from the Tianshan Mountains, he wouldn't even dream of showcasing his virility on the bed. But the act must still be put on. I pitifully threw myself forward, clutching the crumpled sleeve of Shui Wei's robe, and pulled out a silk handkerchief from my bosom, infused with the scent of onions, deftly dabbing the corners of my eyes. So spicy, too much onion, how careless. A pool of tears welled up in my eyes and streamed down, as I pleaded with a voice choked with sobs. Husband, please come back to the mansion with me. The Jing dynasty is so vast. There must be renowned physicians and skilled healers who can cure your illness. Beside us, the stunningly beautiful Miss Peony let out a sudden giggle. Then quickly composed herself and suppressed the laughter. She continued to huddle in the corner, putting on a pitiful appearance, and even took the opportunity to tousle her disheveled hair, making herself look even more delicate and as if she had been wronged. Shui Wei's face was covered in a thick layer of soot, and with a scrape of his fingernail, he could lift enough coal cinders to last the entire winter. He pushed me back with a backhanded shove, snarling viciously, "Yi, you barren hen, I will definitely divorce you." Shui Wei's strength wasn't too great, perhaps because he had drunk too much wine at the birthday banquet today, leaving him with little energy, but by using this force to feign throwing it out, I successfully added another rumor to the capital's gossip. The young marquis is impotent and takes out all his frustration on his wife. The autumn day was suddenly cold. Clutching an onion-soaked handkerchief, I threw myself onto the icy ground, tears streaming down as I wiped them. After catching a glimpse of the crowd gathering to watch, I closed my eyes, steeled my heart, and shouted with a death-defying resolve, "Husband, I promised to go out and find a donor. Isn't that enough? I'll agree to anything. Please come back to the mansion with me." The entire Yufeng Tower fell silent. You could hear a pin drop, with no melancholic background music to artificially set the mood. Even the peony girl, who had been hiding in the corner pretending to be pitiful, couldn't help but wipe her face and grab a handful of scattered melon seeds nearby, cracking over a dozen in a row. The young gentlemen and storytellers who had come to watch the commotion were stunned by these words. Everyone was astonished by my magnanimity. Everyone marveled at my unwavering loyalty. Everyone despised the young Marquis for his shameless and despicable behavior. Among them, a handsome young man in a white robe standing at the forefront waved his folding fan and, as if without thinking, said, "Borrowing a seed is no big deal. I am willing to reluctantly help the Marquis's household leave an heir." With tears in my eyes, I looked up at this fearless gentleman. Isn't this the young master from the censor's household? The censor's wife and the elderly lady of the Shui family have been at odds since their youth, always clashing whenever they meet, from their days as young ladies in the inner chambers to after they were married. It is said that on the day of their weddings, the two brides encountered each other on the road and, despite the thick curtains of their sedan chairs, could not resist exchanging sharp words, nearly causing both to miss their auspicious entry times. In the 10th year of their feud, the old Marquis and the censor had become almost mortal enemies, capable of hurling insults at each other in court for an hour without repeating a word. In the 20th year of their feud, the young Marquis and the censor's eldest son met like sworn enemies, each time exchanging blows until one was nearly dead. Now, I carefully examined the handsome appearance of the censor's eldest son. He was dignified and elegant, with a radiant and graceful demeanor, exuding a noble and refined charm. Thud. I swallowed my saliva. I've agreed to the matter of borrowing a seed, and the eldest son of the censor has also agreed. The only one left is Shui Wei, who is still throwing a tantrum, stomping his feet and pounding the table in refusal. Shu Munan, what kind of person do you think you are? How dare you mock me? When his name was called, Shu Munan gently waved his folding fan, looking even more dashing and elegant. I was merely helping the Marquis's household resolve their troubles. How did it become mockery? The young Marquis, unable to perform his marital duties, only vents his anger on his innocent wife, truly making everyone a laughingstock for no reason. Everyone nodded in agreement. Shui Wei, fueled by alcohol, swung his fist at the eldest son of the Shu family. Shu Munan was not to be outdone, skillfully raising his foot to kick at the other's lower regions. I quietly and slowly moved to an inconspicuous spot, snatched a handful of melon seeds from Miss Peony, and began cracking them while gossiping. Did my husband fail to get things done today? The disdain on Miss Peony's face was barely contained. She straightened her ample chest and said with contempt, "He's just a useless show-off. He struggled for half the day without showing any vigor. Yet he still had the nerve to call me ugly. Pa, I'm the most beautiful courtesan in the capital, and countless people dream of getting close to me but never get the chance." The young Marquis didn't even pay a single tael of silver, yet he demanded to see the top courtesan as soon as he arrived. It's obvious he doesn't have much money in his pocket. I tilted my head to take a closer look at Miss Peony's appearance. With a delicate head and moth-like eyebrows, skin as smooth as congealed fat, at the age of 16, she was stunningly beautiful, captivating the entire city. So beautiful, like the breathtaking entrance of Miss Ruyan in the movie I once saw. If I were a man, I would definitely. Wait, what did this delicate peony just say? Has Shui Wei, who is as poor as a church mouse, not settled the bill yet? The Marquis's estate does not own much farmland or shops. and for the most part, it survives on a meager monthly stipend. On the very first day I married into the family, Xue Wei was already scheming to make me hand over all my dowry to fill the many financial holes in the estate. As a corporate drone who had been poor for 20 years and suddenly struck it rich, I held tightly to my dowry money. For 3 years, Xue Wei couldn't squeeze a single penny out of me, a man who gave me nothing but cold looks every day. After years of modern education shaping my mindset, I would never spend a single cent on him just to get the cold shoulder. The financial hole in the Xue family grew larger and larger. So large that even the biting draft in the hallway could knock a person over head first. I never quite understood why I had crossed over into this world. Perhaps the original owner had long been killed by Xue Wei, and I was here to live another life in her place, seeking revenge and settling old scores. None of that matters. What matters is, I turned to ask Peony, how much silver would Xue Wei spend on a visit to Yufeng House? Peony slightly furrowed her beautiful moth-like eyebrows, carefully calculated, and then said, just my appearance alone costs 1,000 taels of silver, not to mention the food, drinks, and damaged items in Yufeng Tower. At the very least, it would amount to 1,500 taels. My usually not-so-bright mind, upon encountering money, instantly saw an 80% surge in intelligence. Seeing that the two young masters had finished their fight, the madam was hesitating whether to claim the losses from Xue Wei or from me, the easy target. Quick-witted as ever, I fainted once again, letting the maids and servants carry me out of Yufeng Tower and onto the carriage back home. Seeing this, the madam had no choice but to steel herself and step forward, addressing Xue Wei, whose face was covered in bruises. With difficulty, young Marquis. The bill at our Yufeng pavilion, Xue Wei, covering his bleeding head, put on a show of being wealthy and not wanting to be looked down upon, saying grandly, how much silver? Miss Peony's appearance fee plus damages, a total of 3,000 taels of silver. Xue Wei's heart skipped a beat, and he sobered up considerably, looking at the mess in the hall. His face flushed a deep crimson. After stammering for a long while, he finally managed to squeeze out a sentence through gritted teeth. I don't have that much silver on me. Wait for me to go back to my residence and fetch it. Rumors in the capital grew increasingly intense, even in the entertainment quarters. It was said that the young Marquis was impotent and took out his frustrations on his wife every day in the residence, putting on airs. Even when visiting the Yufeng pavilion, he didn't have enough silver to settle the bill. But what does all this have to do with me, after all? The one who will be framed and kicked out won't be me. Early the next morning, I rose from the agarwood bed adorned with gold and jade, pushed aside the soft silk brocade quilt covering me, leisurely stretched, and then took the thrice-boiled and thrice-steeped Snow Peak green tea from the maid to rinse my mouth. Extravagant beyond reason, living in extreme luxury, especially after touching the neatly arranged, golden, chubby ingots by the pillow, I successfully laid the foundation for a good mood for the day. Everything I saw seemed to be bathed in a layer of divine light, and my state of mind was so peaceful it was almost unbelievable. The maid, Chundao, barged into the bedchamber, shouting at the top of her lungs. Seeing the holy glow on my face and my look of having seen through the world of desires, she couldn't help but stand by the bed, wailing in frustration as if I were a hopeless case. Miss, how can you still have the heart to sleep? The young Marquis has brought the white moonlight he's been keeping outside back to the mansion. That woman is already 4 months pregnant, and right now, she's being brought into the Marquis's residence with great fanfare. Oh, my drowsiness vanished instantly, and I was suddenly filled with a gossipy spirit. He brought her in without any status so quickly. I thought he was going to wait until he took my dowry before marrying her into the mansion. My news has always been the most well-informed in the entire capital. Money can make the devil turn the millstone. With enough silver, It's not impossible to make the millstone push the devil. Not to mention a small marquis's estate, as long as the silver is sufficient. I can even find out how many moments His Majesty spent in the Empress's chambers last night. From the very first day I crossed over, I knew that Shui Wei married me only for the money, no face, no substance, allowing everyone in the Marquis's household to laugh at me, just waiting to find fault and divorce me, so they can swallow up a large sum of dowry money. It comes as no surprise that if the dowry were swallowed up by him, what awaits me would be nothing but a dead end. If the original owner were still here, she would likely have been ground down into a handful of ashes in the backyard of the Marquis's residence. Unfortunately, the original owner is gone, replaced by a corporate drone from the modern world who died from overwork. For the sake of silver, I must live on like an indomitable cockroach, showcasing the skills of a modern miser, and continue to outwit my dear husband. All my unused skills in domestic scheming are reserved for today's battle. With a spirited and confident wave, I beckoned to Chundao, "Hurry up and help me get dressed and made up. I'm going to meet the white moonlight my husband holds dear to his heart. Remember to give me a suitable makeup look, miss. What makeup shall we do today?" The widow's makeup for a husband who died suddenly. I never expected that Chundao would give me a radiant peach blossom makeup. It seems that in her eyes, her young mistress becoming a widow is an extremely joyous occasion, worthy of the Yi family hosting a grand feast for 3 days and 3 nights. I reached out and smeared the rouge from my cheek to the corner of my eye, instantly transforming into a pitiful, delicate figure with tear-reddened eyes. I come from a merchant background, while Shui Wei, despite having nothing but the northwest wind in his sleeves, is still a marquis who inherited his title. Therefore, playing the victim to evoke sympathy is the most effective tactic. The ostentatious sedan chair came to a steady halt in front of the Shui residence. A jade-white hand extended from behind the soft curtain, and Shui Wei, who had been waiting at the entrance, quickly reached out to assist the frail woman inside. Staring at her slightly swollen belly, he loudly exclaimed, "Qingyang, you've worked hard carrying my child." The phrase "my child" was uttered with crystal clarity, enough for the surrounding onlookers to hear it distinctly. Passers-by stopped in their tracks, curiously eyeing this gentle lady who had never shown her face before, and began whispering among themselves, "Wasn't it said that the young marquis is incapable? Who is this lady? How come she looks like the legitimate daughter of Lord Liu, who was demoted to commoner status 3 years ago? This child must be about 4 or 5 months old." As I stepped out of the marquis's mansion, I took in all the scattered whispers. Upon hearing this, Liu Qingyang straightened her not-so-large belly, trying to make it more visible to the surrounding commoners. Meanwhile, Shui Wei, who had been dejected the day before, now looked radiant and triumphant. However, his joyful eyes instantly turned icy when they fell upon me. "Yizhizhi, how dare you show your face? This marquis is determined to divorce you, this barren hen." Beside them, Liu Qingyang swayed her soft waist as she stepped forward to soothe Shui Wei's agitated temper, then put on a considerate expression and said, "Sister, it's clearly you who has been in the mansion for 3 years without producing any offspring. How can you still throw dirty water on the young marquis?" After speaking, she deliberately straightened her belly, which was at most a little over 4 months along, and made an effort to show its roundness to everyone. I deftly pulled out a handkerchief with a faint onion scent from my bosom, dabbed the corners of my eyes, and the sharp sting shot straight to the top of my head, instantly bringing tears streaming down my face. My reddened eyes seemed unable to bear the blow of the scene before me. With trembling fingers, I pointed at Liu Qingyang's belly, which she was trying to hold high, and choked back a sob in my throat as I said, "Husband, what do you mean by this?" Shui Wei's arrogant face showed a hint of disdain. "Yizhizhi, you have been in the marquis's mansion for 3 years without bearing a child. I am going to divorce you and send you back to your family. The position of the young mistress of the Marquis's mansion will always belong to Qingyang." Upon hearing this, Liu Qingyang was overjoyed and quickly chimed in. "Sister, such a large marquisate needs an heir, since you cannot bear children. You must step aside for me." Beneath the onion handkerchief, a cold sneer escaped from the corner of my lips. An heir, in this dynasty, without amniocentesis or paternity tests, who could prove that the child in Liu Qingyang's womb was truly Shui Wei's? I seemed unable to withstand the shock before me any longer. Slowly taking a step back and covering my face with a handkerchief, before my heart and soul shattered, I uttered each word with perfect clarity: "Husband." Does the seed sister Liu borrowed from her own cousin still count as an heir of the Marquis's household? Whenever I say something shocking, there is always an eerie silence around me. Of course, my words are not without foundation. Before the Liu family was convicted, Liu Qingyang had been childhood sweethearts with her cousin, and they were set to marry after her coming-of-age ceremony. 3 years ago, the Liu family was convicted overnight, and all were demoted to commoners by His Majesty. Liu Qingyang, with her lofty ambitions, naturally looked down on her cousin, who had fallen into poverty, and instead became Shui Wei's mistress. Perhaps because I spent my money effectively. I remember the few times Liu Qingyang held hands with her cousin and the whispers they exchanged more clearly than the two parties involved. As for whose child this is in her belly, I don't really care. The atmosphere around was even more tense than on the day of the birthday banquet. The onlookers all wore a strange, gossipy expression, and even their glances at Liu Qingyang's belly carried a hint of mockery. Through the thick belly, no one in this era could prove that the child was Shui Wei's, and Lord Shui, the Marquis, probably had no eccentric hobby of showcasing his virility in front of outsiders. A cuckold's shame seemed to be a man's greatest humiliation. Shui Wei's face visibly darkened, his eyes wide with fury, as if he wanted to kill me on the spot. But I know, he dares not, nor is he willing. Not only in this era is killing one's wife a serious crime, but more importantly, if I were to die before being divorced and sent out of the house, then the dowry would have to be returned to the Yi family without a single coin missing. In the first year of arriving in this era, I had already thoroughly studied all the laws of the court and found loopholes to protect myself. Sure enough, Shui Wei suppressed his anger and said sternly, "Whether this child is mine, I know better than anyone." I flicked my handkerchief and uttered something astonishing. For months ago, the Marquis accompanied His Majesty on the autumn hunt for a full half-month. Wasn't it Cousin Liu who personally came to help? All the onlookers let out gasps of sudden realization, with many storytellers among them busily scribbling away, preparing material for the sensational tales that would soon set the capital ablaze. Liu Qingyang's face suddenly turned pale as she flusteredly explained, "You're talking nonsense. My cousin and I are completely innocent. This child is clearly the young Marquis's." Once again, I was disappointed. I had thought that the Marquis's white moonlight was a clever one. But it turns out her skills in domestic intrigue couldn't even last 3 rounds. This rendered all the dozens of times I've watched empresses in the palace and the 800 methods of harem scheming I've learned completely useless. Shui Wei's face twisted into a bizarre contortion, a mix of madness, disbelief, confusion, and the fury of a cuckold. In the end, a man's pride outweighed all else, and he roared, "The child is mine, Yi Ji. Just wait to be divorced and thrown out of this mansion." With that, he flicked his wide sleeves and strode into the Marquis's residence. Liu Qingyang, flustered and anxious, shed tears as she hurried after him, whispering explanations and swearing oaths in a constant stream. Shui Wei returned to the mansion, seething with resentment. From a distance, one could even see white steam rising from the top of his head. But in these times, who isn't weighed down by resentment? Back in the modern era, I was just another 996 office drone, putting in 2 hours of unpaid overtime every day, on call 24/7 on weekends, with more resentment in my bones than any ghost. My very blood seemed to flow with various forms of the word poor. Having finally arrived in this era as a merchant's daughter, I naturally value silver more than my own life. If my husband's family were to squeeze even a single coin from my hands, wouldn't that be a disgrace to my modern reputation as a corporate slave? Liu Qingyang ultimately settled down peacefully in the Marquis's residence, though instead of moving into the promised Wanshou Pavilion as initially agreed, she was relocated to a dilapidated courtyard in the southeast corner of the estate. On the very first day of her arrival, her mother-in-law made a grand display by generously gifting Liu Qingyang numerous gold and silver jewelry from her own pocket. Urging her to take good care of her pregnancy and strive to bear a child for the Marquis's lineage, Liu Qingyang shyly accepted a box of outdated jewelry, then went to Wanshou Pavilion to flaunt her triumph. Chun Dao whispered worriedly in my ear, "Miss, might Madame Liu deliberately drop the child and then blame it on us?" "No," I confidently explained. "The child is her greatest reliance. She is more concerned about the child's safety than anyone else. Shui Wei has been secretly seeking doctors to treat the illness I gave him with strong medicine, and Liu Qingyang must be aware of this." Chun Dao looked at her with admiration. "Miss, I've noticed that ever since you married into the Marquis's household, you've become increasingly clever. When there are no men in your heart, drawing your sword feels divinely effortless." As Liu Qingyang, supported by her waist, led a group of maidservants into Wanshou Pavilion with great fanfare. She was just about to show off the box of dull-colored gold jewelry in her hand. However, her gaze fell upon the pile of gold ingots in the front hall, and her expression instantly darkened. "My greatest hobby in life is counting money, both in modern times and in ancient times. Counting money brings me joy and helps me forget all the troubles in the world." In the Wanshou Pavilion, piles of gold and silver can be seen everywhere, and wherever you go, it's a dazzling sight of gold. Liu Qingyang struggled to withdraw her envious and jealous gaze, straightened her belly to declare her sovereignty. "Yi Zhizhi, since you can't bear children, you shouldn't cling to the title of the Marquis's wife. I advise you to step down early, and perhaps the Marquis will still grant you the position of a concubine." "Is that how the young Marquis sweet-talks you in bed?" Let me mimic him. Qingyang, once I divorce that barren hen from the estate, I'll welcome you through the gates with a grand procession, demote her from wife to concubine, hand over all her dowry to you, and you'll be the only mistress of this Marquis's household." How did you know?" I spread my hands. "A few days ago, the young Marquis said the same thing to the peony courtesan at Yufeng Tower. After saying that, I added fuel to the fire. I can also paint a grand picture, Qingyang. Once you enter my door, I will conquer the world for you, making you the ruler of the mortal realm and uniting all 6 realms. How about it? Is the picture I paint more fragrant and more perfect?" Chun Dao happily leaned in. "Miss, where did you learn that from?" I rolled my eyes. "In those male protagonist power fantasies, when the hero can't even afford a 3-cent meat bun. This is exactly how he sweet-talks the heroine." Liu Qingyang stumbled and nearly fell, pointing at me and cursing. "Yi Zhizhi, don't you dare try to drive a wedge between me and the Marquis. I'd like to see just how much trouble a merchant's daughter like you can stir up." I thoughtfully pondered Sister Liu's words for a moment. After she left, I stood up, clapped my hands, and called out to Chun Dao, "The level of domestic scheming here is too low. It's hindering my performance as a modern corporate drone. Tonight, let's go pull off something big. On a moonless, windy night, it's the perfect time for murder." As the hour of high approached, an inconspicuous carriage slowly passed by a quiet alley in the capital. Its wheels rumbling softly, I clutched a floral cloth bag tightly in my hand, squinting slightly as I lifted the soft curtain to peer outside. Chun Dao, beside me, whispered nervously, "Miss, where are we going to rob?" "Rob what? Who in the entire capital has more silver than I do?" "I've spent the past 3 years gathering evidence of Xue Wei's private dealings in official titles. Today, we're here to deliver it to those in need. The Marquis's estate has been running at a loss for years. After marrying me, they thought they could rest easy, but in 3 years, they haven't managed to squeeze a single coin out of me. Naturally, such a large estate needs some alternative methods to increase its income. For a Marquis's estate with no shops or businesses, the only path left is the risky trade of official titles. Xue Wei always thought I was like other women, confined to the inner chambers, gazing up at the square patch of sky. Only skilled in the ways of survival within the household, but I had traveled there from the modern era. The political maneuvers Xue Wei played in private, I had seen over 800 different versions of them on Douyin in the modern world, far more than he had ever encountered. As for the art of balancing court officials, even teenagers in the modern era could recite it backward. How much more so for a seasoned office worker like me, who had been immersed in the workplace for years, plus, with countless psychology masters and motivational quotes regularly taking turns to brainwash me. My personal moral bottom line is unbreakable, and I feel no sense of pride in the male-dominated era's notion of a wife's glory depends on her husband's status. So, I weighed the cloth bag in my hand, my eyes as calm as still water. To kill, one must borrow a knife. These pieces of evidence need the right person to present them to His Majesty, Chun Dao asked nervously. Then how do we get the evidence to the right people? Do we need to send someone to befriend them, gain their trust? And then, before he could finish his chatter, I pushed open the carriage door and hurled the package in my hand. It traced a perfect parabola over the nearby courtyard wall. From inside, Xu Munan's pained cry rang out, "Ouch! Which ruffian is trying to harm this young master in the dead of night? What a coincidence! The eldest son of the Xu family isn't sleeping in the middle of the night and is actually wandering around the backyard." I clapped my hands, climbed back into the carriage, and said to Chun Dao, "The most sophisticated power plays often employ the simplest methods. Mission accomplished. Time to head back and prepare for tonight's second act." Chun Dao followed me back to the Marquis's residence with a face full of confusion, only to see Xue Wei waiting in the front hall, looking utterly agitated as he growled in a low voice, "Yizhi, where have you been so late?" I habitually took out a handkerchief and dabbed the corner of my eye, once again tears streaming down like rain. "I went out to borrow a seed. Coincidentally, Aunt Liu's cousin was visiting the estate, so I thought I'd ask if this cousin had time to leave an heir for the Marquis's household." The pitch-black night could not suppress the ashen look on Xue Wei's face. He swept his hand, sending the teacup on the table crashing to the ground, so furious that he nearly choked on his breath. "Yizhi, don't you dare slander me. How could the child in Qingyang's belly possibly be someone else's? Her heart has always belonged to me alone." I flicked my handkerchief dismissively. "Give it a rest, Marquis. You only visit her 3 to 5 days a month, yet you talk as if the two of you are conjoined twins, stuck together for 12 hours a day. If you don't believe me, go take a look at the side gate of the Marquis's residence. I guarantee your head will turn greener than the Persian chrysanthemums I grow." As Xue Wei and I passed through the layers of courtyards and reached the side gate, faint whispers of a conversation could be heard from behind the door. "Qingyang, now that you're living a good life, you mustn't forget me. Who allowed you to come? If the Marquis sees you, I won't be able to explain it even with 100 mouths. Get out of here, now." "Didn't you call me here, Qingyang? I knew you still had feelings for me." I couldn't bear to look at Xue Wei, patting the non-existent green hair on his head as I tried to console him. "My lord, love is a ray of light, so green it makes you panic. As long as life goes on, even if there's a hint of green on your head, A man should take things lightly. There's no hurdle that can't be overcome. The child may not be yours, but as long as your wife is, that's enough. Before the voices outside the door could finish their argument, Shui Wei's furious temper could no longer be contained. With his mind filled with thoughts of betrayal, he roared angrily in the silent depths of the night. Who dares to cause a commotion and make a scene outside the Marquis's residence? Liu Qingyang was frightened out of her wits. Upon seeing Shui Wei's face, which seemed to glow with a greenish hue, her beautiful features paled in terror, and her stomach began to ache faintly. I stepped forward and interjected to assert my presence. Master Qi, the Marquis is incapable of performing his marital duties. The future heirs of this Grand Marquis estate will rely on your diligent efforts. Qi Bin, recalling the recent rumors in the capital about the young Marquis's impotence, had a sudden lapse in judgment and blurted out, of course. After speaking, she quickly covered her mouth, intending to slip away quietly. Shui Wei had never been bullied right at his own doorstep before. He waved his hand, signaling a group of servants to drag Qi Bin aside. Immediately, screams like those of a slaughtered pig echoed one after another, piercing and ghostly. Liu Qingyang, trembling, knelt down while supporting her belly. Meeting Shui Wei's sharp, scrutinizing gaze, she cried out in panic, Lord Marquis, I swear, this child is truly yours. I have done nothing to betray you. Shui Wei did not move an inch, only staring fixedly at Liu Qingyang's belly, his knuckles cracking. After a long while, he finally squeezed out a sentence through gritted teeth. Someone, lock concubine Liu in the woodshed. As Liu Qingyang was dragged away in a sorry state, she belatedly realized what had happened and, with disheveled hair, wailed, Yizhizhi, it was you. You deliberately called Qi Bin over. I feigned weakness and wiped the corner of my eye. Naturally, I was the one who called Qi Bin. Once the letter was delivered, along with a few tales of gold and a few lines of sweet talk like even in the Marquis's mansion, I still miss my cousin. He eagerly came to the mansion to see his former cousin. As for what would happen to his cousin if they were discovered, why would Qi Bin, a man, care about that? He would be more than happy for the whole world to know that there was a woman who was utterly devoted to him. So much so that even after marrying the Marquis, she still pined for him, a commoner. To stay safely in the Marquis's household, the only way is to cut all ties with Qi Bin and never see him again. But clearly, Liu Qingyang's straightforward mind couldn't navigate such twists and turns. The next day, I slept unusually well until the sun was high in the sky, just as I was in a dream discussing money-making ideas with the Duke of Zhu. A clamor of noise came from the front courtyard of the Marquis's household, along with the cries and wails of my mother-in-law. I jolted out of bed, not even bothering to put on my shoes. I threw off the priceless brocade quilt, grabbed Chun Dao, and exclaimed excitedly, "What's going on? Did the young Marquis hang himself in shame because of impotence? Have I finally achieved a happy life without men, only with silver?" Chun Dao wiped the cold sweat from her forehead, her words pulling me back to reality. "Miss, the Dali Temple officials just came by. They said that this morning, Censor Shu exposed the young Marquis for buying and selling official positions in court. The Emperor was furious and has ordered the Dali Temple to investigate the matter thoroughly. The young Marquis has already been taken into custody at the Dali Temple." Oh, so Shui Wei didn't hang himself in shame. This news really chills me to the core. Just as I was about to go back to bed for a second sleep, my mother-in-law's sharp, sarcastic, and panicked voice came from outside. "Yizhizhi, what time is it and you're still not up? My son has been taken away. How can you have the face to sleep so soundly, holding the priceless brocade quilt?" I faced my mother-in-law's frantic appearance and complained with a hint of morning grumpiness. "It's your son who was arrested, not mine. So why can't I sleep?" My mother-in-law, who was already crying so hard she could barely catch her breath, turned pale and nearly fainted. After struggling to catch her breath, she lost all her usual composure and screamed at me hysterically, "Hurry up and take some silver to the Ministry of Justice to get Wei back." Her tone was as commanding as ever, with none of the humility one would expect when asking for a favor. "How much silver does mother-in-law need? First, bring out 10,000 taels of gold, if that's not enough. Then go to the bank and withdraw more." When my mother-in-law said 10,000 taels of gold, it sounded as worthless as 10,000 Vietnamese dong. I gave her a knowing look, meeting her red-rimmed eyes, and said earnestly, "Mother-in-law, rest assured, the Marquis's household has always detested the smell of money, and this time, I will not let even a hint of that taint touch the Marquis." With that, she threw on her robe and called for Chun Dao. Leaving the exquisitely carved and painted Wanshio pavilion behind, ignoring her mother-in-law, who had fainted in the arms of her maid, she made a grand and noisy journey all the way to the Dali temple. My hair may be disheveled, but my persona must remain intact. At this moment, I am still the long-suffering Marchioness of the Marquis's household, enduring constant harassment from my in-laws, while outwardly defending my husband's already tattered reputation, all the way. I thought of every miserable thing that had ever happened in my life, especially the times I had my perfect attendance bonus docked by that skinflint Jew, before I could barely suppress the curve of my lips and put on a tearful expression as I stepped into the pitch-dark Dali Temple prison. Less than an hour after entering, Xue Wei had already become disheveled and frantic. Upon seeing me, his usually aloof eyes lit up as if he had spotted his only lifeline. He rushed to the iron bars of the cell, filled with hope, and said, "Fiji, have you come to save me? As long as the silver can be repaid, His Majesty will surely show mercy and let bygones be bygones. I promise that the position of the Marquis's wife will belong to you alone for the rest of my life, and I will never take a concubine." Caught off guard, I was fed a big pie and shown a display of affection. I shook the pie out of my mind and then keenly realized that my money was being coveted. I turned around warily and asked the deputy minister of the Dali temple behind me, "How much silver is involved in this case of the young Marquis?" "Over 200,000 taels of silver, and the case files alone are a thick stack. Madam could first repay this sum of silver on behalf of the young Marquis, and then petition His Majesty for leniency." I shook my sleeves and pulled out a crumpled 20-tael silver note. "Here you go." The deputy minister of the Court of Judicial Review struggled to reach out and take the silver note, tucking it into his robe, still short by 199,980 taels. I helplessly wiped the corner of my eye. "This silver is for you to have some tea. After all, reviewing cases is hard work." Xue Wei, watching anxiously from his cell, couldn't help but stomp his feet and interject loudly, "Yi Ji, you are the wife of the Marquis. If you don't save me, you will surely be implicated one day." Suddenly understanding, I nodded and pulled out a divorce agreement from my sleeve, waving it in front of Xue Wei's increasingly terrified eyes. "You're absolutely right, Marquis. That's why, a few days ago, you already wrote this divorce agreement. As of now, we are no longer husband and wife." "You're talking nonsense. When did I ever write a letter of separation? Even if we were to part, it would be a letter of divorce expelling you from this mansion." I raised an eyebrow. Of course, Xue Wei had never written a letter of separation. 3 years ago, after marrying into the Xue family, I secretly had Chun Dao imitate Xue Wei's handwriting. Chun Dao, who had studied for several years, learned quickly and had long since mastered Xue Wei's flamboyant cursive script, turning it into her own delicate calligraphy. Coupled with the private seal that had just been stamped today, there would be absolutely no flaw in this era. Unless a man is truly in the wrong or fears the power of his wife's family, he would never write a letter of mutual separation to disgrace himself. They much prefer to write a letter of divorce. standing at the pinnacle of power to relish the sorrow and despair of a woman with nowhere to turn. What a coincidence. I am a modern person, and I also enjoy watching the frantic cries and desperate struggles of someone who has reached a dead end. Therefore, I waved the letter of mutual separation in my hand. The Marquis is impotent and unable to have children. Such a significant matter naturally calls for mutual separation with me. Even if this were taken to the magistrate, reason would not be on the Marquis's side. The pure-hearted deputy minister of Dali Temple covered her face and turned away. The surrounding prison
seen no fewer than 30 versions of in TV dramas. Even when it comes to palace or household intrigues and covert schemes, my mind is filled with countless ways to handle them. The superficial knowledge that these noble families and dignitaries struggle to learn from just a few individuals, living in the era of information explosion, can master in a single day. Not only can I finish learning, but I can also see the pinned comments that encourage thinking beyond the material. I don't need to be reborn, nor do I need to foresee the plot. 25 years of modern life are enough for me to use my intelligence and strategy to plan a broad and smooth path for myself. No time-traveling woman is foolish enough to perform a scandalous, indecent dance in front of everyone, nor does any modern person who arrives in this era lower their intelligence to challenge authority. Even more so, no modern woman who comes to this world genuinely believes that relying on a man can ensure a stable life. I took a deep breath. In the 3rd year after my arrival, my new life is finally about to begin. The efficiency of the Dali Temple in handling cases is truly top-notch. In just 7 short days, the enraged emperor issued an edict stripping Xue Wei of his noble title and demoting him to a commoner. After being reduced to a commoner, Xue Wei once came to my residence, shouting and demanding to see me, but each time he was driven away by the guards. In the blink of an eye, winter arrived, and the streets and alleys of the capital were blanketed in a layer of silvery white. Nestled in the warm carriage, holding a hot hand warmer, I made my way from the newly opened hot pot restaurant, leisurely heading toward the Yi residence. While passing through a secluded alley, I suddenly heard a familiar shouting, "How dare you disrespect this Marquis? One day, I'll slaughter you insolent commoners." I gently lifted the soft curtain to look outside and saw Xue Wei, dressed in plain cloth, arguing fiercely with several burly farmers. Scattered at his feet were piles of winter firewood. The mockery and disdain on the farmers' faces pierced Xue Wei's heart, and their words were even more relentless. "Marquis, where is there a Marquis? Would a Marquis live among us common villagers? The emperor despises the buying and selling of official titles the most. Back then, sparing the Marquis's family from exile was already an act of leniency. How could he possibly let you continue as a Marquis? What Marquis? He's nothing but a flashy but useless figure." A biting cold wind swept through the alley, and Xue Wei, clad in coarse linen clothes that offered no protection against the cold, shivered uncontrollably. Hearing the commotion, my former mother-in-law emerged from the humble cottage. No longer displaying her former arrogance, she skillfully threw herself to the ground and began wailing and lamenting, crying out that someone was bullying her and her orphaned child. Xue Wei is already 23 this year. In an ordinary household, he would have long been independent, so it's hard to see how he qualifies as an orphan. A few villagers, finding the scene too noisy, walked away in annoyance, leaving Xue Wei alone with a face shifting between emotions, allowing the cold wind to strip away the last vestiges of warmth from his body. Back when he was a Marquis, discussions in the capital about his impotence were still somewhat veiled. Now that the person has lost his title, everyone has begun to talk and laugh freely. Even when I go to a tavern for a meal, I can hear 3 storytellers speaking with great relish and enthusiasm, as if they had been right there watching when the young Marquis was at his weakest. I gently lowered the soft curtain and called out to my maid, Chundao, beside me, "Let's go, there's still a lot to do today." The carriage slowly moved over the snow, and from afar, a few words of blame drifted over. "If you had been willing to live a good life with Gigi back then, we wouldn't have fallen into such a state." I could tell from the start that Liu Qingyang was not a decent, well-behaved person. Now look, the moment the Marquis's household fell into trouble, she was the first to run off to that fellow named Chi. Mother, wasn't it you who told me to seize Yi Gigi's dowry? That's why I never gave her a good look from the moment I married her. How can you blame it all on me now? I didn't catch the rest of the conversation. The bitter cold of winter had just begun, and whether Shui Wei, penniless as he was, could make it safely through the season remained an open question. The carriage arrived at the entrance of the Yi residence. Just as I was stepping down from the carriage with the support of Chundao, a clear voice came from behind. Miss Yi. I turned to look and saw Xu Munan, in the dead of winter. He still had the audacity to flick open a folding fan to show off his charm, only to be chilled by the cold wind and sneeze 3 times in a row before sheepishly putting the fan away. Is there something you need, young Master Xu? May we speak in private? I followed his suggestion and walked side by side with him to a secluded spot. Xu Munan's low voice came. I know it was Miss Yi who threw the evidence of Shui Wei's buying and selling of official positions into the Xu residence. I feigned surprise as I looked at him. Xu Munan continued with a smug expression. I truly admire Miss Yi. So today I wanted to ask, do you have any plans to remarry? Marry whom? How am I, young master? You don't mind that I was once married? I don't mind that wax spearhead. I wiped my thick-skinned face. I have no intention of marrying. If that's what you're here to ask, young Master Xu, you may leave now. Wait, since Miss Yi is not considering marriage for the time being. Could you perhaps give me some advice on business matters? I nodded vigorously. In the hierarchy of scholars, farmers, artisans, and merchants were considered lowly. Aligning with the Xu family was indeed a promising path. After receiving my affirmation, Xu Munan finally left, satisfied. Chundao stepped forward, puzzled, and asked, Miss, why didn't you agree to young Master Xu's marriage proposal? Chundao, all men in this world are the same. They marry for ulterior motives. Not to burn with love. I have never believed that men are capable of true feelings. So, more often than not, marriage is a one-way road with no return. Chundao seemed lost in thought, and I turned my gaze toward the figure disappearing at the end of the alley. What Xu Munan didn't know was that I deliberately let him know I was the one who privately delivered the evidence, just to dispel the Xu family's suspicions. After all, the most skilled hunters often appear as prey. Only by making the Xu family feel everything was under their control could they confidently wade into this muddy water. And what no one knew was that on the night of the wedding 3 years ago, after Shui Wei left the mansion following his show of dominance, I sat upright on the wedding bed all night, clenching my palms, already having thought of countless ways to deal with him. As long as I tightly held onto the money, the hole in the Marquis's estate would grow larger day by day, and Shui Wei, with his empty pockets, would eventually have to resort to selling official titles. At that time, the person I had privately prepared to spend all his wealth to buy an official position would naturally come begging to him. While he was scheming against me, I had already dug a pit for him. All that was left was to wait for the right moment to confidently push him in. As for him, whose reputation had long been ruined throughout the capital, even if he cried out that the divorce letter was not written in his own hand, no one would believe him anymore. Everyone only gossips behind the young Marquis's back, saying that not only did he bring disaster upon himself, but he also dragged his poor wife into the mess. The sky began to scatter fluttering snowflakes once more. I reached out my hand and caught a pure white flake, watching it melt in my palm. In a daze, I seemed to see a woman who looked exactly like me. Dressed in tattered clothes with disheveled hair, her faint, illusory figure drew closer, and a faint, ethereal voice whispered softly by my ear. Thank you. Back then, I was demoted to a concubine, and all my dowry was seized by the Shui family. Liu Qingyang tormented me for 5 long years, eventually beating me to death and abandoning my body in the wilderness. Thank you for avenging me. The voice was so faint it could be blown away with a breath. I snapped back to reality. And there was no longer any trace of that ethereal figure. I turned around, lifted the hem of my skirt, and stepped up the stairs back into the Yi residence. I still had many things to do. My future. There are even more infinite possibilities. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.